My name is Ericka Thompson, and at 67, I never imagined I would become homeless in the very house I built with my own two hands. My daughter Lydia, whom I raised alone after her father abandoned us, gradually turned from my sweet little girl into someone I barely recognized. The storage room became my bedroom, my kitchen access restricted, and my existence reduced to lucky to be here. What Lydia never bothered to verify was one crucial detail about the property deed. If you are watching this from your own home, give this video a like and let me know where you are from in the comments. I would love to know I am not alone in this journey. I grew up in a small town just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where hard work was valued above all else. My parents taught me that nothing worth having comes easy, a lesson I carried throughout my entire life. By the time I was 15, I was already working part-time at the local diner, saving every penny I could. My dream back then was simple: become a nurse and help others. Little did I know how much I would need to help myself first. I met Tom during my second year of nursing school. He was charming with a smile that could light up a room and promises that seemed to paint our future in gold. We were young in love and terribly naive. 6 months after meeting, we were married in a small ceremony with just our closest family members. Those first few years were genuinely happy. Tom worked as a sales representative while I finished nursing school and started my career at St. Joseph's Hospital. By 28, I had established myself as a competent nurse in the intensive care unit. My supervisors praised my attention to detail and compassionate care. I was making good money, and Tom seemed to be doing well in his career too. We had our own apartment, a decent car, and savings that grew steadily each month. I was meticulous about saving, always putting away 30% of my income, no matter how tight things got. When I turned 30, we decided it was time to start a family. Lydia came into our world on a snowy December morning, a beautiful 7-pound baby girl with her father's eyes and what would later become my stubborn chin. The moment I held her, I promised to give her everything I never had growing up: a stable home, financial security, and unconditional love. For 3 years, we were the perfect little family, at least on the surface. What I didn't know was that Tom had been gambling away our savings and taking out loans in both our names. The facade crumbled one Tuesday morning when I woke up to find him gone, along with our savings, my jewelry, and even Lydia's piggy bank. All he left was a note: "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." Just like that, I became a single mother with a 3-year-old daughter and discovered we were $90,000 in debt. The bank was threatening to take our apartment. The car was 2 months behind on payments, and my perfect little world had shattered overnight. I did what any mother would do. I survived. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, took a weekend job at a nursing home, and cut every possible expense. For years, Lydia and I lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. She slept in the bedroom while I took the couch. We ate simple meals, shopped at thrift stores, and counted pennies. But through it all, I kept saving, determined to give Lydia the stability I had promised her. By the time Lydia was 10, I had managed to pay off most of Tom's debt and rebuild my credit. I had also nurtured a dream that kept me going through the hardest nights, building our own home. Not just any house, but one designed specifically for us on a piece of land that would be completely ours, free and clear. It took 5 more years of sacrifice and determination. I worked holidays, birthdays, and weekends. I sold handmade crafts on the side and even started a small business, providing private nursing care to wealthy clients. Lydia sometimes complained about my absence, but I always reminded her that everything I did was for our future. When Lydia turned 15, I purchased 2 acres of land just outside the city. It was perfect, close enough for my commute, but far enough to feel peaceful. For the next 3 years, I worked with an architect friend who gave me a discount contractors who were willing to let me do some of the work myself to save money, and suppliers who offered deals when I bought in bulk. Every single element of that house had my touch. I selected the warm oak for the floors, chose the soft yellow paint for the kitchen that reminded me of summer mornings, and insisted on large windows to let in natural light. The master bathroom had a clawfoot tub I found at a salvage yard and restored myself. The kitchen had open shelving I installed, and the backyard featured a garden space where I planned to grow vegetables and flowers. Lydia, now a teenager, initially seemed to appreciate our journey. She helped pick out fixtures and would excitedly tell her friends about our house being built. She would visit the construction site with me on weekends, planning where her furniture would go and which color she wanted for her bedroom walls. I chose a soft lavender that she loved at the time. The day we moved in was one of the proudest moments of my life. I had built this. Through determination, sacrifice, and thousands of hours of hard work, I had created a home for us. The mortgage was substantial but manageable with my income, and I was determined to pay it off early. As Lydia finished high school and headed to college on a partial scholarship with me, covering the remainder, our relationship was good. She called regularly, came home for holidays, and often expressed gratitude for everything I had done. She would bring friends home and proudly give them tours, telling stories about how I had picked out specific features or worked alongside contractors to save money. I focused on paying off the mortgage, making extra payments whenever possible. By the time Lydia graduated college with her marketing degree, I had succeeded. At 59, I owned our home completely free and clear. It was my greatest achievement, the physical manifestation of years of sacrifice and love. Lydia initially did well in her career at a marketing firm in the city. She was bright, creative, and determined, qualities I had always encouraged in her. She rented an apartment with a friend and seemed to be building her own independent life. Then she met Patrick. From the first time she brought him home, something about him made me uneasy. He was polished and well-spoken, but there was a calculating look in his eyes that reminded me too much of Tom. When Lydia looked away, his charm would slip just slightly, revealing something colder beneath. I kept my concerns to myself, telling myself that Lydia was an adult who needed to make her own choices. Looking back now, I should have seen the warning signs in how Lydia changed around him. She became more critical of me, commenting on how I dressed like an old lady or how my house was stuck in the past. Small criticisms that I brushed off as youthful impatience. I never imagined they were the first drops of what would become a flood. The power shift began so subtly, I barely noticed it happening. Lydia called me one evening, her voice tight, with stress, explaining that she had lost her job due to company downsizing. With the job market being competitive, she was struggling to find something new. Her roommate was moving in with her boyfriend, leaving Lydia unable to afford the apartment alone. "Mom," she said, "would it be okay if I moved back home, just temporarily? Just until I find another position?" Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't? My house had 3 bedrooms, mine Lydia's old room, and a guest room I rarely used. There was plenty of space, and I was secretly pleased at the thought of having my daughter home again. "Patrick's between apartments too," she added quickly. "Would it be okay if he stayed as well? Just for a month or 2, I promise." I hesitated at this, that uneasy feeling returning. But I reminded myself that they had been dating for nearly 2 years at this point. Lydia was 26, not a child anymore. "That's fine," I agreed. "The guest room is available." Lydia laughed, a sound that now seems loaded in hindsight. "Mom, we'll stay in my room together. We're adults." They moved in the following weekend. At first, everything seemed fine. Lydia was actively job hunting, and Patrick claimed to be consulting remotely. They kept to themselves mostly, and I tried to give them space, continuing my routine of work gardening and volunteering at the local senior center. The changes began about 3 weeks after they moved in. I came home one day to find the living room completely rearranged. My comfortable old sofa had been pushed against the wall. My reading chair moved to the corner, and the coffee table I had refinished myself was nowhere to be seen. "We needed more open space," Lydia explained when I asked. "That furniture arrangement was so outdated. This flows better, don't you think?" Before I could answer, Patrick chimed in. "We put your little table in the garage. It was taking up too much space." The coffee table had been a gift from a patient whose life I had helped save. I had spent weeks refinishing it, but I bit my tongue. It was just furniture, after all. But it didn't stop there. Within 2 months, they had rearranged the kitchen cabinets, replaced the shower curtain in the main bathroom with one they preferred, and started using my office as their personal storage space. Each time I raised concerns, Lydia would sigh dramatically. "Mom, we live here too. We need to be comfortable." Our first real argument came when I found Patrick using my computer without permission. He had moved all my files into a single folder, labeled Mom's Stuff, and installed several programs I didn't recognize. "You can't just take over my computer," I said firmly. "We need it for job searching," Lydia replied, entering the room. "Your computer was just sitting there most of the day anyway." "That doesn't mean it's communal property," I insisted. Lydia rolled her eyes. "You're being so territorial, Mom. It's just a computer." "This house has rules," I reminded her. "The same rules that have always existed." That's when she first said it, though lightly. "Maybe those rules need updating. Things change, Mom." Patrick would encourage these confrontations, I noticed. He would stand slightly behind Lydia, nodding encouragingly as she pushed boundaries further. When she'd back down, he'd often make comments later that reignited her dissatisfaction. "Your mom is really stuck in her ways," I overheard him saying one night. "You'd think she'd be more grateful for our help around here." Help. As if rearranging my life without permission was helping me. By the 6-month mark, Lydia had started criticizing how I ran the house. My cleaning wasn't thorough enough. The way I organized the pantry was inefficient. The temperature I kept the house at was too cold in summer and too warm in winter. "Let me handle the thermostat," she insisted. "We're wasting money." Money that I earned. Money that paid for the house that I owned. But again I gave in trying to maintain peace. One evening as we ate dinner together, an increasingly rare occurrence, Lydia brought up the future of the house. "Mom, have you thought about what will happen to this place when you get older?" she asked casually, though I noticed Patrick suddenly paying close attention. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, you're not getting any younger," she said, as if 61 was ancient. "Eventually you might want to downsize or move into a senior community. It would make sense to put my name on the deed now, so things are easier later." The suggestion took me by surprise. "I'm perfectly healthy and have no plans to leave my home." "Of course not now," Patrick interjected smoothly. "But it's smart to plan ahead. Transferring the deed now could save on estate taxes later." I doubted Patrick had any real understanding of estate tax law, but the conversation planted a seed of worry. Were they waiting for me to get older and leave? Was this temporary arrangement becoming permanent in their minds? The issue might have remained theoretical if not for my fall 2 months later. I slipped on a wet floor that Patrick had mopped, but not dried properly, fracturing my wrist and spraining my ankle. Suddenly, I was dependent on Lydia and Patrick for help with daily tasks. They used this period to further cement their control. Patrick rearranged my bedroom to be more accessible, which somehow involved moving my personal items into storage and replacing my comfortable chair with one they found for a bargain. Lydia took over my financial management temporarily, insisting it was too difficult for me to write checks or manage online banking with my injury. One afternoon, still confined mostly to bed, I asked Patrick to bring me my mail that had been collecting on the kitchen counter. He brought a neatly sorted stack, but I noticed several bank statements were missing. "Were there any envelopes from First National?" I asked. "I put all your important financial stuff in a special folder," he replied vaguely. "Lydia's handling all that until you're better." Later that night, unable to sleep due to pain and growing concern, I made my way carefully to the office. There I found Patrick hunched over my financial documents making notes. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. He jumped, clearly startled. "Just helping organize your paperwork," he said quickly, shuffling papers into a folder. But I had seen enough. He had been looking at my property deed tax records and bank statements. The next day I called my old friend Barbara from my room using the cell phone I kept charged by my bed. "Can you come over tomorrow? I need a favor," I told her. Barbara arrived, bearing flowers and concern. When Patrick and Lydia went out for groceries, I asked her to help me to the office where I retrieved important documents, and asked her to make copies and store the originals at her house. "Ericka, what's going on?" she asked, noting the property deed among the papers. "Just being cautious," I replied. "Lydia's been talking about putting her name on the deed. I told her I'd look into it, but I'm not sure it's the right move." Barbara frowned. "It's not. Not unless you're absolutely certain that's what you want. Once she's on the deed, you can't simply remove her." After that day, I told Lydia I had consulted with my bank about the deed transfer, and they advised against it for now due to potential tax implications. "We can revisit it later," I said, noticing how her smile tightened at the corners. "Sure, Mom," she replied. "Whatever you think is best." But the look she exchanged with Patrick told me they weren't dropping the issue permanently. They were just changing tactics. The full takeover of my home began with Lydia and Patrick's wedding held in my backyard the following spring. I paid for most of it despite my concerns about their relationship and their continued unemployment. Lydia had found only temporary contract work, while Patrick claimed his consulting business was still developing. They had been living with me for over a year at this point, with no signs of moving out. The wedding was small, but elegant, with white chairs arranged on my carefully tended lawn and floral arrangements. I had stayed up late to create myself. During the reception, as champagne flowed, Patrick clinked his glass for attention. "We want to thank everyone for coming to our special day," he announced, arm around Lydia, "and especially thank Ericka for opening her home to us. We're excited to announce that we're making this house our own with some exciting renovations coming soon." Guests applauded while I froze champagne glass halfway to my lips. This was the first I'd heard of any renovations. When I questioned Lydia later, she waved away my concerns. "Just some updates, Mom. This place could really use a modern touch." 2 months after the wedding, Lydia announced she was pregnant. I was genuinely thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. That joy quickly dimmed when Lydia explained their plans. "We'll need to convert your bedroom into the nursery," she informed me over breakfast. "It has the best natural light and is closest to our room." "My bedroom," I echoed in disbelief. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" "We thought the storage room would work," Patrick replied, not looking up from his phone. "We can move a bed in there. You don't need much space, right?" The storage room was the smallest room in the house, barely 8 feet by 10 feet, with one tiny window and no closet. I had used it for holiday decorations and out-of-season clothes. "That's ridiculous," I protested. "Why not use the guest room for the nursery?" "We're converting that into a proper home office," Lydia explained impatiently. "We need a professional space for when we start working from home." "This is my house," I reminded them, my voice rising. "You can't just reassign bedrooms without my agreement." Lydia's expression hardened. "Mom, we need to make this work for our growing family. My house, my rules." The phrase struck me like a physical blow. My house. When had it become her house in her mind? Despite my protests, within a week, I found myself relocated to the storage room. They had moved in a narrow twin bed and a small dresser. My clothes barely fit in the available space, forcing me to keep seasonal items in plastic bins under the bed. My beautiful bedroom furniture pieces, I had carefully selected and saved for, disappeared into the garage or was sold online for extra nursery money. Family photographs that had lined the hallway for years were replaced with modern art prints that Patrick selected. My comfortable reading nook in the living room was dismantled to make space for a massive entertainment system. Even my garden wasn't spared, as Lydia decided the vegetable beds I had maintained for years were unsightly and had them removed to expand the patio. "You can't just take over everything," I said one evening after finding they had cleared my toiletries from the main bathroom. "We're not taking over," Lydia countered. "We're making necessary changes for our family. You need to be more flexible, Mom." "You should use the half bath off the kitchen anyway," Patrick added. "It doesn't make sense for you to use the main bathroom when there's another option." The half bath had no shower or tub. When I pointed this out, Lydia sighed dramatically. "You can use the main shower when we're not home or early in the morning before we're up. It's not that complicated." My access to the kitchen was similarly restricted. They complained about my cooking smells, the way I organized the refrigerator, and my tendency to wake early and make coffee. "We need our sleep," Mom Lydia insisted. "Pregnancy is exhausting. Can you just stay in your room until at least 7? My room. The storage closet with barely enough space to turn around. Patrick began making pointed comments about finances. "Utilities are so expensive with an extra person in the house," he would say within my hearing. Or, "Food costs are really adding up with feeding 3 adults." I had been buying all the groceries and paying all the bills since they moved in. When I reminded them of this, Lydia actually laughed. "We're giving you a place to live, Mom. The least you can do is contribute." A place to live. In my own house. When my granddaughter Mia was born, a beautiful 6-pound, 8-ounce baby with a full head of dark hair, I experienced a brief period of joy and hope. Perhaps this new life would heal whatever had broken in our family dynamic. I knitted blankets and tiny hats, bought the softest stuffed animals I could find, and eagerly awaited my role as a grandmother. Reality quickly proved different. Lydia limited my time with Mia, claiming my old-fashioned childcare ideas might harm the baby. "Parenting has changed a lot since your day," she would say dismissively when I offered suggestions. I was allowed to hold Mia only under supervision and was criticized for everything from how I supported her head to the lullabies I sang. When I asked if I could watch the baby while Lydia took a shower or nap, she usually refused, saying Patrick would help instead. The storage room grew increasingly uncomfortable as summer approached. With only the small window and no air conditioning vent, it became stifling during the day. I purchased a small fan which Lydia complained was too noisy and wasted electricity. "You're lucky to have a place to stay," she told me one particularly hot afternoon when I asked if we could adjust the air conditioning. "Many people your age have to struggle in retirement homes." Lucky. In the house I had built. The house I still owned, though they seemed to have forgotten this fact entirely. My friends gradually stopped visiting. The first time my friend Susan came over after Mia's birth, Lydia made it clear she wasn't welcome, questioning why she was there and suggesting it wasn't a good time to visit. When Barbara tried to maintain our regular coffee dates at my house, Patrick would hover uncomfortably or interrupt our conversations with household tasks that suddenly needed attention. The final social connection to break was my bridge club. For years, I had hosted 3 other women every Thursday evening. After Lydia and Patrick moved in, they complained about the noise, the snacks I served, and how the timing interfered with their evening routine. "Thursday is our date night now," Lydia announced, though they rarely left the house. "You'll need to find somewhere else for your card games." The isolation grew more pronounced around the holidays. Lydia invited Patrick's family for Thanksgiving dinner, a meal I had always prepared with love and tradition. This time I was excluded from the planning and preparation. "Patrick's mom is bringing her special recipes," Lydia explained. "It would be confusing to have too many cooks." On Thanksgiving Day, I emerged from my room to find the dining table beautifully set with china I didn't recognize. My own holiday dinnerware, passed down from my mother, was nowhere to be seen. "Where should I sit?" I asked, noticing all places were accounted for. Lydia glanced at me with irritation. "We set up a TV tray in your room. There's not enough space for everyone at the table." I ate Thanksgiving dinner alone in the storage room, listening to laughter and conversation from the dining room, tears sliding silently down my face. The next day I called Barbara again. "I need to understand my options," I told her. "They think this house belongs to them." Barbara, who worked in real estate and had a contact in elder law, arranged a discreet meeting. The attorney confirmed what I already knew: the house remained solely in my name. I had never added Lydia to the deed, despite discussing it. "You have every right to ask them to leave," the attorney advised. "This is elder abuse, what they're doing to you." Elder abuse. The term shocked me, though I knew it was accurate. Somehow I had gone from a strong, independent woman to a victim, all while trying to help my daughter. "Keep all documentation," Barbara urged. "We might need it later." What neither of them knew was how much worse things would get before I found my strength again. The breaking point came gradually then, all at once, like water building pressure against a dam. Looking back, I can identify each crack that formed before the final collapse. One evening, in early December, I was retrieving a sweater from the hall closet when I overheard Patrick and Lydia talking in their bedroom, the door slightly ajar. "We can't keep supporting her indefinitely," Patrick was saying. "The financial burden is too much." "What do you suggest?" Lydia asked. "She built this house. She's not going to leave willingly." "There are nice care facilities that take Medicare," he replied. "My aunt moved into one last year. Once we convince her it's for her own good, we can finally make this place truly ours." I stood frozen, the sweater clutched to my chest. They were planning to remove me from my own home permanently, the home I had sacrificed everything to build, the home that legally belonged to me alone. "She's been forgetting things lately," Lydia mused. "If we start documenting that, it could help make the case that she needs specialized care." I hadn't been forgetting anything. I had been choosing my battles, letting small issues slide to avoid constant conflict. They had mistaken my strategic silence for mental decline. The next crack appeared when I discovered Patrick's unemployment wasn't as recent as they had claimed. A piece of mail arrived addressed to him from the state unemployment office, referencing benefits that had begun nearly a year before they moved in with me. They had never been between apartments or experiencing a temporary setback. They had been planning this takeover all along. The third crack formed during a dinner party they hosted for Patrick's work colleagues, an event I wasn't told about until the day before. I was introduced to guests dismissively as Lydia's mother who lives with us, as if I were the interloper in my own home. Throughout the evening, Lydia repeatedly contradicted or corrected me in front of others. Mom gets confused about these things she would say with a patronizing smile when I mentioned something about the house or neighborhood. After one such comment, I firmly stated, "I'm not confused. I've lived here for 20 years." The table fell awkwardly silent until Lydia laughed artificially. "See what I mean? We built this house just 5 years ago, Mom. Your memory is playing tricks again." Her blatant lie stunned me into silence. Later, as guests were leaving, one of Patrick's colleagues approached me quietly. "My mother went through something similar with my sister," he murmured. "If you need someone to talk to, here's my card. I'm an elder law attorney." I slipped the card into my pocket, touched by his perception and concerned that the situation was obvious enough for a stranger to notice. The pressure continued building. The storage room's inadequate heating became a serious issue as winter deepened. Minnesota winters are notoriously harsh, and the small space heater I was allowed barely took the edge off the chill. I began wearing layers of clothing to bed and using multiple blankets, yet still woke shivering most nights. My health suffered noticeably. A persistent cough developed, and I felt constantly tired and achy. When I mentioned seeing a doctor, Lydia dismissed my concerns. "Everyone gets winter colds, Mom. Just take some over-the-counter medicine." The cold developed into pneumonia by January. My fever spiked one night and I could barely catch my breath. I managed to call Barbara, who immediately came over and was horrified by my condition. "She needs a hospital now," she insisted to Lydia, who had answered the door in her bathrobe, annoyed at the late-night intrusion. "It's just a cold," Lydia argued. "You're overreacting." Barbara, bless her heart, pulled out her phone. "Either you drive her to the emergency room, or I'm calling an ambulance, and then I'm calling Elder Protective Services." The hospital admission lasted 5 days. Pneumonia at my age was serious, the doctors explained. They were concerned about my living conditions when I reluctantly described my small, cold room. "This sounds like potential elder abuse," my doctor said quietly, during a moment when Barbara had stepped out. "Would you like to speak with a social worker?" I declined, still holding on to hope that Lydia would realize what she was doing and change. Still believing that my daughter, somewhere beneath Patrick's influence, was the loving girl I had raised. Barbara insisted I stay with her for a week after my discharge to properly recover. Her guest room was warm, spacious, and private, a stark contrast to what awaited me at home. During this reprieve, she helped me access my financial records and make copies of important documents, including the property deed that confirmed my sole ownership. When I finally returned home, Lydia met me with unexpected hostility. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "We needed help with Mia." No concern for my health. No questions about my recovery. Just annoyance that their free babysitter had been unavailable. "I've been recovering from pneumonia," I reminded her. "The doctor said I needed rest and warmth." "Well, we've had a difficult time while you were gone," she countered. "Patrick and I have discussed it, and we think you need to contribute more financially if you're going to continue living here." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Continue living here, Lydia. This is my house. I paid for it. I own it." "We've been maintaining it for years now," she argued. "We pay the utilities, buy the groceries." This was a blatant lie. I had been paying all household expenses since they moved in. In fact, I had noticed my utility bills increasing dramatically under their management, despite my restricted use of facilities. "I'd like to see the utility bills," I said calmly. "All of them for the past year." "Why?" she asked, suddenly defensive. "Because I've been giving you money every month to pay them, and I'd like to see where my money has been going." Lydia huffed and left the room, returning with a stack of papers that she thrust at me. "Here," satisfied. I wasn't. The bills showed late payments, disconnection notices, and payment plans established. Despite my regular contributions, they had clearly been mismanaging the funds or using them for other purposes. The final crack, the one that broke the dam entirely, came 2 weeks later. I returned early from a medical follow-up appointment to find both Patrick and Lydia in my storage room, rifling through my personal papers. They had pulled out the locked box I kept under my bed and somehow opened it. "What are you doing?" I demanded from the doorway. They jumped guiltily. Lydia recovered first. "We were looking for your insurance information, for Mia's sake." But the papers in Patrick's hands were my will and financial documents, not insurance forms. They were looking for information about their inheritance, about what they would get when I was gone. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not my spirit, but the chains of obligation and guilt that had kept me prisoner in my own home. I turned without another word and left the house, walking the 4 blocks to Barbara's home despite the cold. "I'm done," I told her when she opened the door. "I can't live like this anymore." Sitting in Barbara's warm kitchen, sipping tea with shaking hands, I finally broke down. All the hurt, confusion, and betrayal poured out in wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. "I don't understand how my own daughter could treat me this way." I wept. Where did I go wrong with her? Barbara reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You didn't go wrong, Ericka. Some people just make terrible choices, especially when influenced by someone like Patrick. This isn't your fault." That night alone in Barbara's guest room, I made my decision. I would reclaim my home and my dignity. The path wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. That had been my life's lesson after all. One I needed to remember now more than ever. The key to reclaiming my life lay in careful planning and the element of surprise. I knew that confronting Lydia and Patrick directly would only result in denial, gaslighting, and possibly escalation of their behavior. I needed to be strategic, just as I had been when saving to build my home years ago. The first step was maintaining appearances. When I returned to the house the next day, I acted contrite and subdued. "I'm sorry for overreacting," I told Lydia. "The pneumonia has left me emotional and tired." She accepted this explanation, readily pleased to see me back in what she perceived as my proper place. Over the next few weeks, I became the model of compliance. I stayed in my room during their active hours, spoke only when spoken to, and offered no resistance to their decisions about the house. Each concession felt like swallowing broken glass, but I reminded myself it was temporary. Meanwhile, I began documenting everything. I kept a detailed journal of daily incidents, noting times, dates, and exact wording of concerning statements. I used my cell phone to secretly photograph the conditions of my room, the notices of unpaid bills, and the changes they made to my property without permission. During my medical appointments twice a week, I actually met with Barbara and occasionally with the elder law attorney who had given me his card at the dinner party. His name was Michael, and he became a crucial ally in developing my strategy. "What you're describing is a clear case of elder abuse and financial exploitation," Michael confirmed after reviewing my documentation. We have multiple legal avenues available, but we need to ensure your safety first." Under his guidance, I opened a new bank account at a different bank, redirecting my pension and Social Security deposits. I provided him with copies of all important documents: the property deed, my will, financial records, and medical reports about the pneumonia that had developed due to my living conditions. "We should also document the condition of the house and your belongings," Michael advised. "Take photographs of every room, especially areas they've modified without permission." This proved challenging, as Lydia and Patrick rarely left me alone in the house. I seized an opportunity when they took Mia to visit Patrick's parents for a weekend. Those 2 days became a documentation marathon. I photographed every room, opened every cabinet, and made notes about my missing or sold possessions. What I discovered during this investigation shocked even me. In the office desk drawer, I found loan applications with my forged signature. They had attempted to take out a home equity loan using my house as collateral. Fortunately, the applications had been denied due to discrepancies in the paperwork, but the attempt itself was criminal. I also found credit card statements showing massive debt in Patrick's name. Shopping receipts for luxury items, expensive restaurant bills, and online purchases revealed where my utility and grocery money had actually been going. They weren't just financially abusing me, they were financially irresponsible in general. During this period, I reconnected with old friends through secret phone calls and occasional meetings arranged by Barbara. Many expressed shock and concern when they learned of my situation. "We thought you didn't want to see us anymore," my friend Susan told me. "Lydia always said you were too tired for visitors or needed quiet because of your health." These rekindled friendships provided not only emotional support, but practical assistance for my plan. Susan, who worked part-time at a small apartment complex, informed me of an upcoming vacancy, a one-bedroom unit within my budget. "It's not fancy," she warned, "but it's clean, safe, and has good heating." I visited the apartment during one of my medical appointments and immediately put down a deposit. Having a safe place to go was essential before making any moves against Lydia and Patrick. With Barbara's help, I began secretly moving my most precious possessions out of the house. We focused on irreplaceable items, photo albums, my mother's jewelry, important documents, and sentimental objects that had somehow escaped Lydia's purges. Barbara stored these in her spare room, along with a few basic necessities I would need when I moved out. During this time, I made a point of befriending my new next-door neighbor, a retired police officer named James, who had moved in recently. I casually mentioned my concerns about strange noises and activities at my house, establishing a groundwork of awareness should things escalate when I finally took action. "If you ever need help day or night, don't hesitate to call," James assured me, giving me his phone number. Under Michael's guidance, I began recording conversations with Lydia and Patrick using my cell phone. Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning I could legally record conversations I participated in without informing the other parties. These recordings captured their controlling behavior, financial demands, and occasional threats about sending me to a nursing home. As I gathered evidence and prepared my exit, Lydia and Patrick's financial situation grew increasingly precarious. Bill collectors called regularly, and I noticed Patrick frequently checking the mail, presumably intercepting demand notices. Their stress manifested in increased hostility toward me and frequent arguments between themselves behind closed doors. I documented the house thoroughly, from the water damage developing in the bathroom they had renovated to the cracked window they had covered with tape rather than repair. Each example of neglect strengthened my case for damages when the time came. While preparing legally and logistically, I also faced an emotional reckoning. For months, I had grappled with feelings of guilt, questioning whether I was doing the right thing by taking such decisive action against my own daughter. During a particularly difficult moment, I confided these doubts to Barbara. "You raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her, and built a home for her," Barbara reminded me. "You've done everything a good mother should do. But parenting also means teaching consequences for actions. Lydia needs to learn this lesson, painful as it may be." One afternoon, I had a rare moment alone with my granddaughter Mia, now 7 months old. As I held her singing softly while Lydia took a shower, I felt a bittersweet certainty that my plan was necessary, not just for me, but potentially for this innocent child as well. What lessons would Mia learn growing up, watching her parents abuse and manipulate her grandmother? What kind of relationship might we have if this situation continued? "I'll always love you," I whispered to her. "And someday you'll understand why Grandma had to do this." After 6 weeks of preparation, everything was in place. I had secured my new apartment and moved essential belongings. I had documented extensive evidence of abuse and financial exploitation. I had copies of all important papers and had secured my finances. The formal eviction papers were prepared and ready to be served. Now I needed only to select the perfect moment to reclaim my house and my dignity. I chose a Sunday afternoon for the confrontation, timing it deliberately to coincide with a small gathering Lydia and Patrick had planned with their friends. The presence of witnesses would constrain their immediate reaction and provide additional documentation of their behavior. That morning I was unusually calm, knowing that, regardless of the outcome, I would no longer be living under tyranny in my own home. I had already moved my essential belongings to the apartment, spending nights there while maintaining the appearance of residing in the storage room. Barbara and Michael would arrive at 2 o'clock, just as Lydia and Patrick's guests were settling in. Around noon, a certified mail carrier arrived with an envelope requiring signature. I deliberately stayed in my room, allowing Lydia to intercept it, as she typically did with my mail. "Mom," she called impatiently, "there's something here for you that needs a signature." I emerged slowly. "What is it?" "How would I know?" she snapped. "Just sign for it so the mail carrier can leave before our guests arrive." I signed for the envelope but didn't immediately open it. "I'll look at it later," I said, placing it on the side table as if it were of no importance. By 1:34, couples had arrived, including Patrick's boss and his wife. They were gathered in the living room drinking wine and chatting while Lydia proudly showed off baby Mia. I remained in the kitchen, preparing cheese and cracker plates, as Lydia had instructed. The envelope sat unopened where I had left it. Just before 2, Lydia called me into the living room. "Mom, can you take those plates out to the patio table? We're moving outside since it's so nice." As the group began migrating toward the back door, I picked up the envelope and finally opened it. "Oh," I said just loudly enough to be heard, "this seems important." Lydia turned irritation clear on her face. "Can it wait? We have guests." "I think you should look at this now," I replied, holding out the papers. "It concerns all of us." With a dramatic sigh, Lydia took the papers. I watched as her expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to shock as she realized she was holding eviction papers, naming her and Patrick as unauthorized occupants in my property. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Some kind of joke." "It's an eviction notice," I explained calmly. "You and Patrick have 30 days to vacate my property." The room fell silent, as the guests froze, suddenly uncomfortable witnesses to a family drama. Patrick pushed through them to snatch the papers from Lydia's hands. "This is ridiculous," he said after scanning them. "You can't evict us from our own home." "It's not your home," I replied, my voice steady. "It never was." Mom's confused Lydia told the guests with a forced laugh. "She's been having memory issues lately." Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I moved to answer it, knowing it would be Barbara and Michael. "These are my friends," I announced as they entered. "Barbara, you know. This is Michael, my attorney." Attorney Patrick repeated his confidence, visibly wavering. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," Michael suggested, noting the uncomfortable guests. "No," I said firmly. "I have nothing to hide. Lydia and Patrick have been living in my house for nearly 2 years under the mistaken belief that it belongs to them. They have relegated me to a storage room, restricted my access to my own home, and attempted to take financial control of my assets." "That's not true," Lydia protested. "We've been taking care of her." "She's confused and probably being manipulated by these people." Michael opened his briefcase and removed a folder. "I have here the original property deed showing Miss Thompson as the sole owner of this property. I also have documentation of the abuse Miss Thompson has suffered, including medical records of pneumonia, developed due to inadequate heating in the room she was forced to occupy." Patrick's boss stepped forward. "Perhaps we should go and give you privacy to sort this out." "Actually," I said, "I'd appreciate if you stayed as witnesses. This isn't the first time Lydia has attempted to dismiss legitimate concerns by claiming I'm confused or incompetent." Lydia's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You promised to put my name on the deed. You said this house would be mine. Eventually." "I considered it," I acknowledged, "but I never promised it, and I certainly never completed any transfer. This house remains legally mine, as it has been since I built it 20 years ago." "20 years," one of the guests echoed, looking confused. "But Lydia said you only bought this place 5 years ago." "Another lie," I said sadly. "I designed this house myself and supervised its construction when Lydia was a teenager. I paid off the mortgage before she even graduated college." Patrick, realizing the situation was slipping out of control, attempted to regain the upper hand. "We've been paying all the bills and maintaining this place while you contributed nothing," he accused loudly. "That's not true either," Barbara interjected, pulling out financial records from her own folder. "Ericka has bank records showing regular payments to Lydia for household expenses. We also have documentation showing those utilities are in danger of disconnection despite her contributions." One of the neighbors, drawn by the raised voices, appeared at the open door. It was James, the retired police officer. His presence, a subtle reinforcement that I was not alone. "Everything okay here, Ericka?" he asked, surveying the tense scene. "We're just sorting out a misunderstanding about property ownership," I explained. "These are the eviction papers I mentioned might be coming." Lydia's eyes widened at the realization that I had been discussing the situation with neighbors. Her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling rapidly. "You can't do this to us," she said, her voice breaking. "We have a baby. Where are we supposed to go?" "You have 30 days to find alternative housing," Michael explained professionally. "Miss Thompson has been more than generous considering the circumstances. She could have pursued criminal charges for the attempted loan fraud using her forged signature." This revelation caused audible gasps from the guests. Patrick's boss looked particularly disturbed. "Loan fraud," he repeated. Patrick paled visibly. That was a misunderstanding. Lydia had permission to sign for her mother. "I never gave any such permission," I stated firmly. "And the loan application was rejected because the signature was clearly forged. As the reality of their situation sank, in Lydia's approach shifted from denial to bargaining. "Mom, please," she begged, suddenly dropping the hostile tone. "We can work this out. We'll move back into the guest room. You can have your bedroom back." "It's too late for that," I replied, feeling a strange calm despite the charged atmosphere. "You had nearly 2 years to treat me with basic dignity and respect in my own home. Instead, you isolated me, degraded me, and conspired to take everything I worked my entire life to build." "What about Mia?" Lydia asked, clutching the baby closer. "Don't you care about your granddaughter? You'll never see her if you do this." The threat hung in the air, a final, desperate attempt at manipulation. The guests shifted uncomfortably, witnessing emotional blackmail in real time. "I love Mia," I said softly, "and I hope someday she'll know me as the grandmother who loved her enough to stand up against wrong, even when it was painful. That's the legacy I want to leave her, not submission to abuse." Patrick made one last attempt. "We can pay rent," he offered. "Market rate. We'll draw up a formal agreement." "I'm not interested in being your landlord," I replied. "The trust is broken beyond repair." Barbara stepped forward and handed Lydia a small box. "These are your new house keys. The locks will be changed tomorrow after you leave for work. Ericka won't be staying here tonight." Lydia stared at the box in confusion. "What keys? What are you talking about?" "Those are keys to nowhere," I explained. "Just like the authority you thought you had over my home and my life. It was never real." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Lydia's face crumpled as the full impact of what was happening finally hit her. Her carefully constructed control was evaporating, exposed as the illusion it had always been. "You can't just abandon us," she whispered. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I corrected her. "I'm reclaiming what's rightfully mine and establishing healthy boundaries, something I should have done long ago." As Barbara and Michael helped me gather my remaining belongings, the guests quietly departed, murmuring awkward goodbyes. Patrick stood frozen, still holding the eviction papers, while Lydia alternated between tearful pleas and angry accusations. James helped carry my bags to Barbara's car, standing protectively nearby as we prepared to leave. The neighbors had emerged from surrounding houses, drawn by the commotion creating an unintended audience for the final act of this family drama. Before leaving, I paused in the doorway of the house I had built, looking back at my daughter. "I'll always love you, Lydia," I said quietly, "but I refuse to be a victim in my own home any longer." As we drove away, I felt a complex mixture of grief, relief, and resolution. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. I was reclaiming not just my house, but my dignity and self-worth. That night in my small but peaceful apartment, I slept better than I had in years, no longer imprisoned in a storage room of my own home. The 30 days following the confrontation were surreal. I remained in my apartment while Lydia and Patrick were forced to face the consequences of their actions. Barbara served as my intermediary, reporting that they initially refused to believe I would follow through with the eviction, then frantically scrambled to find new housing as the deadline approached. According to James, who kept a neighborly eye on the property, they held a hasty yard sale selling furniture and household items to raise cash. Items that I had carefully selected for my home were sold to strangers for a fraction of their value or sentimental worth. It hurt, but I reminded myself that they were just things. My dignity and self-respect were worth more. On day 29, Barbara supervised, as locksmiths changed every lock in the house. The following day, Lydia and Patrick moved out, leaving without a proper goodbye. They took more than they should have, including appliances and fixtures that were part of the house, but I chose not to pursue these relatively minor losses. The legal battle had served its purpose, and I was ready for healing to begin. My first day back in my own home was bittersweet. The house I returned to barely resembled the one I had built and loved for decades. Walls had been painted in colors I would never have chosen. The hardwood floors I had carefully selected showed scratches and water damage from neglect. The garden I had tenderly maintained for years was overgrown and littered with Mia's plastic toys. More painful than the physical changes were the missing elements, the family photos they had removed, the heirloom furniture they had sold, the sense of peace that had once permeated every room. I stood in the center of my living room, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been lost and what needed to be rebuilt. "It's still your house," Barbara reassured me, seeing my distress. "The bones are good. Everything else can be restored or replaced." She was right, of course. I began the process of reclaiming my space methodically, one room at a time. I started with my bedroom, stripping the nursery decorations and repainting the walls in the soft sage green I had always loved. Friends helped me find a new mattress and bed frame to replace what had been sold. Susan contributed curtains she had made herself, their gentle pattern, reminiscent of the ones I had chosen years ago. The storage room that had been my prison was the most difficult space to address. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to even open the door. When I finally did, with Barbara by my side for support, the memories of isolation and humiliation washed over me so powerfully that I sank to my knees, sobbing. "I lived like this," I whispered. "I let them reduce me to this." Barbara held me as I cried. "But you found your strength again," she reminded me. "You survived, and now you're thriving." Eventually, I transformed that room completely, turning it into a bright office and craft space where I could pursue my long-neglected hobbies. The single tiny window was replaced with a larger one that flooded the room with light. No trace remained of the dark closet that had housed my despair. Healing emotionally proved more challenging than restoring the house. At Barbara's suggestion, I began seeing a therapist specializing in elder abuse recovery. Dr. Winters helped me navigate the complex grief of losing my relationship with my daughter while processing the trauma of what I had endured. "You're mourning multiple losses," she explained. "The loss of the daughter you thought you had, the loss of time with your granddaughter, and the loss of the sense of safety in your own home. It's normal to feel overwhelmed." Through therapy, I confronted the guilt that had allowed the situation to develop in the first place. I had enabled Lydia's behavior, afraid of losing her love if I set proper boundaries. Dr. Winters helped me understand that true love doesn't require self-erasure. "Healthy relationships have healthy boundaries," she reminded me often. Teaching Lydia that lesson, even at this late stage, is an act of love, not punishment. 3 months after the eviction, I encountered Lydia unexpectedly at the grocery store. She looked thinner and more tired than I remembered, with none of the polished confidence she had displayed in my house. We stood awkwardly in the produce section, both clutching our shopping baskets like shields. "How are you?" I asked, finally breaking the tense silence. "Managing," she replied curtly. Then, after a pause, "We're staying in an apartment across town. Patrick's hours got cut back at work." I nodded, unsure what to say. I wanted to ask about Mia, but feared reopening wounds. Lydia answered my unspoken question. "Mia's fine. She's walking now." A flicker of something softer crossed her face. "She still has that stuffed rabbit you gave her." "I'm glad," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. We parted without further conversation, but something had shifted. She had spoken to me without hostility or manipulation for the first time in years. A week later, a card arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a photo of Mia and a brief note she should know her grandmother. Call if you want to visit sometime. It was signed simply Lydia with a phone number. I approached this tentative olive branch with caution, arranging to meet Lydia and Mia at a public park rather than either of our homes. Our first reunion was awkward but peaceful. Mia didn't remember me, of course, but smiled curiously at the new face. I brought a small stuffed elephant to match the rabbit she already had, which she accepted with toddler enthusiasm. As Mia played in the sandbox, Lydia surprised me with her first real acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "I know things got out of hand," she said, staring at her hands. "Patrick had a lot of ideas about what we deserved, and I got caught up in it." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start. I chose my response carefully. "We all made mistakes," I conceded. "I should have set clearer boundaries from the beginning." Over the following months, our relationship began a slow, cautious rebuilding. I learned through these conversations that Lydia's marriage was struggling under financial pressure and Patrick's controlling tendencies, patterns she was beginning to recognize from our situation. "He talks about what I owe him for supporting me," she confided during one visit. "It sounds familiar now, in a way it didn't before." I listened without judgment, offering support without pressure. When she finally asked for my help leaving Patrick 6 months later, I provided emotional and practical assistance, but maintained my boundaries. I helped her find an apartment she could afford on her salary from a new job, but made it clear she wouldn't be moving back into my home. "You need to stand on your own feet," I told her, "for yourself and for Mia." The house continued its transformation as I did. I worked with a financial advisor to establish a trust for Mia's future education with careful provisions that protected my assets while ensuring my granddaughter would benefit from my hard work. The trust included the house, but specified that it could never be occupied by Lydia or Patrick again. I remodeled rooms to erase painful memories, but also to create spaces that reflected who I had become through this journey. The formal dining room, where I had been excluded from family holidays, became a welcoming space, with a round table symbolizing equality and inclusion. The kitchen was updated with accessible features that would serve me well as I continued aging, a practical acknowledgement of the future without fear. My social connections flourished as I renewed old friendships and formed new ones. My bridge club resumed meeting at my house every Thursday. I joined a gardening society and a book club at the library. The isolation that had been forced upon me gave way to a rich community life. Perhaps most meaningful was my new passion for advocacy. Working with Michael, I developed workshops for senior centers about property rights, financial protection, and recognizing the early signs of elder abuse. My story resonated with many others who had experienced similar situations with adult children or caregivers. "You're helping people find their voice," Michael told me after a particularly successful presentation. "That's a powerful legacy." Lydia attended one of these workshops, sitting quietly in the back row. Afterward, she approached with tears in her eyes. "I never saw it from your perspective," before she admitted. "I'm sorry, Mom, truly sorry for what we put you through." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. True healing takes time, especially when trust has been so thoroughly broken. But it was a genuine beginning built on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. Today, 2 years after reclaiming my home, I can look back on that painful chapter with perspective. The storage room is now filled with light and creativity instead of darkness and despair. My relationship with Lydia, while still carefully bounded, has elements of authentic connection. Mia knows and loves her grandmother unaware of the struggle that almost severed that bond. The house stands as a testament to resilience, to the power of reclaiming one's dignity and worth. Each room tells a story of loss and recovery of boundaries established and honored. It remains my sanctuary, but one I now share willingly and joyfully with those who respect its meaning and its history. Life has taught me that true love sometimes means standing firm rather than giving in, that healthy relationships require healthy boundaries, that it's never too late to reclaim your power and dignity. These are the lessons I hope to pass on to Mia, to the women who attend my workshops, and to anyone who hears my story. Home isn't just about property deeds and legal ownership, though those matter. Home is about creating a space where you are valued, respected, and free to be your authentic self. It took nearly losing mine to truly understand its worth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for themselves. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and healing. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and your space in this world.